Good morning, evening, or afternoon, everyone. This is Matt from nurango.ca, and today we are going to be installing asterisk-16 and FreePBX version 14. So thanks for joining me. I've got set up here a cloud instance on OpenStack, so you can use whatever you would prefer, and in this case we're assuming that you don't have access to the machine to install a pre-made ISO, or that's just not something that you're interested in. So jumping right into it, what we're going to do first is start by updating the OS. First and foremost, rather, we're actually going to check to see if SE Linux is enabled, which it's disabled. So if that happens to be enabled by default, you're going to want to go ahead and disable that. Let's go ahead and update the OS. Try to fast forward this to get through it quick. Okay, now we've rebooted and we're back into the system. Now I should mention that we are installing this on CentOS-7, which does not have support for commercial modules at this time. So if you are continuing along to install FreePBX, bear in mind that you'll need CentOS-6 at the moment, as of mid-2019, to have commercial module support. There are some workarounds, discussions in the forums and the wiki, so if you're interested, definitely check that out, but we won't be covering that here. We'll be using CentOS-7. And now there is some debate whether or not to install different versions of FreePBX. Current stable is 13, 14, and some of 15. Now the wiki is not exactly clear on the EOL, but as of April 2019, FreePBX has announced that they will be EOLing 13 rather, and so everyone should be upgrading to 14 and 15. There's migration tools available. We're going to go with the base of 14, and that can be upgraded using the tool from the web interface at some time in the future. So let's get continued on here, and we're going to install our dependencies. I'm either going to include these flags in the description below or on the textual blog article that accompanies this video. So let's go ahead and get those dependencies installed. Now these dependencies are the prereqs for installing asterisk-16. We're going to be building asterisk with PJSIP, and a lot of people are transitioning over to PJSIP as it's considered the more stable SIP channel. Now I'm not exactly 100% sure on that as of now. I have experienced problems with PJSIP. I install both, and I do use both. I've been more familiar with PJSIP recently, and it is becoming more and more stable. However, there are little nuances, and I definitely don't like the configurations as much as ChanSIP. But you can use both, and we'll be installing PJSIP, and you'll have access to both here. Also should be noted that your firewall will likely be enabled by default, and you'll have to set up rules for both the web interface and for SIP ports, so 10,000 to 20,000 UDP for audio, potentially 4569 for any IAX, and then SIP-SIPs, so 5060, 5061 on UDP, and then of course for TCP, and if you so should want to do so. Now with all our dependencies installed, we're going to go ahead and build and compile asterisk. We're going to make our directory to build, CD in there. We're going to download PJSIP 2.8, which will be working with asterisk-16. wget on tar. We're going to go into the folder. There are some configuration flags to build PJSIP, and we are Gonna run those flags here to configure. We're gonna make the dependencies. Those of you familiar with the matrix might recognize this. If not, don't worry about it. Make. Bake it all together. Now that it's built and compiled, we're going to install. Oh, my fault. We're going to need the sudo to make install and ld config. Okay, that's the installation of PJSIP. Now what we're going to do is go back into our asterisk directory. We're going to download the current version of asterisk-16. I'm going to decompress. Move into the asterisk folder. My fault. The version has changed. Now what we're going to do here is check and make sure that the MP3 sources are included. Now prior, this wasn't included. So you're going to have to run this script here to get the MP3 compatibility for audio files like recording and streaming MP3, for example, MOH, and so on. Now we're going to configure and build the Jansen bundle. So for the additional codec support. Now prior, what you had to do is also download the G722 HD audio files, but those are now included with asterisk, so you don't have to grab those as a separate download. And then what we're going to do here is just make sure that the asterisk configuration has MP3 support enabled through menu select. Okay, so we're gonna tick this off here. Save and exit. We can run make. Compile all this. I could have went with a faster box, but for sandbox purposes, I definitely cheaped out. Okay, now we can go ahead and do what it told us to do, make install. Oh. Now, if you want to have the default asterisk configuration examples in the etc asterisk folder, you can go ahead now and run make samples. This will put all the different types of configuration files possible into the folder here. And you can run that now if you would like to do so. Now, in order to make this start up on boot, we're going to make config as well. Sorry about that. So now we've got ourselves a startup script in systemctl. And finally, what we'll do here is create an asterisk user and group. We're going to set the permissions on all the asterisk files, logs, and folders. And there we have it. Again, be sure to make samples if you want sample configuration files, which will also have the permission set on them. And you'll be able to go ahead and start asterisk right away. Now that we're moving on to installing FreePBX, we've installed an EPAL release dependency, a repo, and as well as the repo for PHP 5.6. For some reason, CentOS-7 installs support for PHP 5.4, I believe, by default. It's old and outdated, and I have no idea why they do that. So we've installed here Apache as well as PHP 5.6 and MariaDB. We're going to install a legacy pair module that we need for the UI. And again, you can add your firewall permissions here as well, should you need to access from the outside. Okay, so we're going to put those in. Reload the firewall. We're going to need to start the database, which is created a symlink. So we've got the startup script enabled there. We're going to go ahead and start the database. We're also going to enable Apache on startup. And we're going to run through the secure installation. Now, very important here that you do not set a default root password, as the FreePBX install script is going to do this for you. So make sure you go ahead and choose no. So current root password is enter for none. That's what we want. That's my fault, hitting the wrong enter key. So set root password. Absolutely N for no. Remove anonymous users. Yes, that's fine. Disallow login remotely for root. Yes. Remove test database. Why not? Reload privileges. You got it. Okay, easy enough. Now what we're going to do here is we're also going to give permissions to var www to asterisk. Let's go ahead and make sure we do that. We're going to make some modifications to Apache, including the PHP ini and the conf file. Okay, so let's run those. We're going to restart Apache. And finally, we're going to go ahead and grab FreePBX-14. I'm going to download the latest from the mirror. I'm going to extract. Clean up the file, because why not? Go into the folder. We're going to use the startup script to start asterisk. It should give us no problems whatsoever. Otherwise, we're in trouble and this video is scrapped. Okay, now we're going to start the installation script. Now what we're going to see here is an installation issue with the FreePBX installer. I noticed this quite a few times on my tests, and this has to do with files missing from etc asterisk that FreePBX wants to see. However, it doesn't have any built-in error correction, and it does generate the files in that folder. So why it wants them, I'm not entirely sure. So hopefully that will be fixed up one day here. So what we're going to do here is go back into the asterisk build directory. That's kind of a pain in the ass, but that's not ideal. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to build that. Sorry about that. We're going to build those samples, of course, using sudopen. Okay, so we've built those out. So now you're going to see here we've got all the files in here. I'm just going to go ahead and chown those, make sure that the permissions are set so I don't get any more hassles out of this. Let's just do this. Okay, now we're going to go back into the FreePBX directory, and we're going to try this again. And obviously you can see here that it's fine. And again, I have played around with this to see what files are missing. You can do that if you want. You can add some of the needed files, but for the purpose of the video, we're just going to go with make sample. And you can see here it's building, so it's creating the database entries, it's setting the permissions on the database, as well as putting all the files and etc. asterisks that it requires, creating etc. freepbx.conf, and as well as writing to ampportal.conf. So now in theory we should be able to log into FreePBX and just complete the process here. I'm just going to stop the firewall. Okay, set up our user, our password, email. I don't suggest putting VoIP server as the system identifier. That's obviously no better. So update to modules, send security emails for unsigned modules. This is really useful if your code changes in any of the modules in FreePBX. It's a cool feature they added, whereas a lot of the core files would sometimes get hacked via web server hack and so forth, and they would modify the files, and there was no way to tell. Now they use signatures on the files, and it will alert you by email as well as when you log in if any of those have been changed. Now I have disabled this in certain instances. One thing about FreePBX that still kind of baffles me is that they're defaulting to SSL and TLS 1.0 for TLS encryption, SRTP. And to me, I mean, if you're using TLS on its own, you want 1.2 as the minimum. So I have modified the UI to include 1.2, but of course it's file modification rather. So it's going to hit you with that unsigned module alert. So let's just set up the system and go ahead and do that. Hit your login, username, password, continue. Time zone, yada yada yada. This I find, at least on my slow VPS, this is going to take a few seconds here, but we're ready to go ahead and show that everything is working fine here. You can clean up these errors after that from missing files, and the important part is that the system is fully functional. Okay, so you can see here we have a fully working system and everything is complete. You can now go in and add some modules, do some updates. You can add your extensions. As you can see here, we've got PJSIP, CentOS-7, and so on. And we've got ourselves a full, complete working system. And if you don't believe me, let's just do a quick test here. Apply config. And there we are. We have an active device. So appear here, we're ready to register and get logged in. Don't forget to lock down your firewall. And again, this is Matt from nurango.ca, a Canadian leader in encrypted SIP trunking and hosted phone systems. So thanks very much for joining me, and we'll see you in the next video.